Hello and welcome to the new episode of Around the World in 7 Days. My name is Pooja and I am here to present you some stories related to important global events. In this segment, we shall analyze two international stories of the past week. First of all, we shall discuss political reasons behind the Sri Lankan economic crisis and diplomatic significance of aid being provided to Sri Lanka by India. Secondly, we shall see that why is it easier for Russia to invade Moldova like Ukraine. Let's move on with our first story. It is rarely witnessed that a country's system fails and the country turns so chaotic that the ministers of the government have to run here and there to escape from the public. At present, such scenes are common in Sri Lanka, India's neighbouring country. Sri Lankan crisis reached its peak when Prime Minister Mahinda Rajapaksa was forced to resign from his post. After Rajapaksa's resignation, Sri Lankans turned violent at several places and so far 9 people have lost their lives and about 200 people have been injured in violence. After the Prime Minister's resignation, Sri Lankans opened a front against President Gotabaya Rajapaksa. Now they are demanding Gotabaya's resignation. After all these developments, it can be inferred that Sri Lanka has emerged as a failed state. The most pertinent question is that how Sri Lanka became a failed state. The second important question is whether India is following the policy of neighbor first. We will try to find answers to both these questions in today's story. We will also inform you about the countries other than Sri Lanka which have become bankrupt. Sri Lankan crisis is a result of the failure of Sri Lankan government's economic policies. Inflation shattered all records in Sri Lanka due to the increasing debt burden. We have discussed Sri Lankan crisis in the last several episodes. Links have been given in the description below for your convenience. At present, Sri Lanka is facing troubles not only because of its economic policies but also due to political reasons. Sri Lanka is in trouble mainly because members of one family have been ruling the country for a long time. Resigning Prime Minister Mahinda Rajapaksa and the present President Gotabaya Rajapaksa are brothers. Similarly, other prominent posts in Sri Lankan government were also held by members of Rajapaksa family. Till February 2022, 5 members of the Rajapaksa family held the most cardinal positions in the Sri Lankan government. Besides Gotabaya and Mahinda Rajapaksa, the post of Finance Minister was held by Basil Rajapaksa, the post of Irrigation Minister was held by Chamal Rajapaksa, and the post of Sports Minister was held by Namal Rajapaksa. Hence, Rajapaksa family is solely responsible for the ongoing Sri Lankan crisis. Sri Lanka, which became independent in 1948, has been performing well in terms of Human Development Index. Sri Lanka has performed better than India in terms of education, health services and income. Sri Lanka ranked 72nd, while India ranked 131st in the 2020 Human Development Index report. According to the World Bank, Sri Lanka's literacy rate was 92% in 2019. India is far behind Sri Lanka in terms of literacy rate. Therefore, the question arises that what were the circumstances due to which Sri Lanka is being counted among the poor countries in the world at present. Out of the past 17 years, Rajapaksa family had occupied the power in Sri Lanka for 13 years. During this period, the wrong policies of the Rajapaksa family, corruption and the desire to stay in power pushed Sri Lanka into a trove. Rajapaksa family, while in power, prioritized their own interests over the country's interest, according to media reports. Although Sri Lanka has become bankrupt, but the Sri Lankan ministers are extremely rich. It is being said that the present situation in Sri Lanka, which has been facing civil war for more than 2 decades, is worse than it has ever been. On the whole, it can be said that Sri Lanka is in terrible state mainly due to political reasons rather than economic reasons. Looking at the present situation in Sri Lanka, another question arises that whether the countries other than Sri Lanka have become bankrupt. What is bankruptcy? Bankruptcy means that a country's credit rating is deteriorating continuously. If the credit rating of a country is bad, then no other country or organization will be ready to provide loans. Borrowing countries fail to repay loans on time and international financial institutions lose their trust in that country. However, Sri Lanka is not the first country that has reached on the verge of bankruptcy. Earlier, Russia became a defaulter in 1998. After the Soviet Union's disintegration in 1991, Russia continued to be burdened with debt in subsequent years. Its currency market had collapsed completely, and at that time, investors feared that the value of Russian currency would fall, which was what happened indeed. Russia faced a sudden loss of $5 billion to the foreign exchange reserves as soon as it became a defaulter. It became difficult for Russians to get employment, loans, and essential goods. 3 banks in the Nordic country of Iceland defaulted on loans worth about $85 billion in 2008. As these banks went bankrupt, it created an economic crisis in Iceland. The citizens of Iceland were unable to repay loans and EMIs. Moreover, they also started losing their jobs. Rising inflation in the market resulted in a recession. Iceland's government had given several exemptions to private banks as part of the liberalization policy. Taking advantage of the government's liberalization policy, private banks distributed a lot of loans to the residents of Iceland on easy terms. When the economic slowdown started in 2008, then the residents of Iceland faced an employment crisis. However, some path-breaking government decisions turned Iceland's fortunes upside down and Iceland recovered from the recession in 2013. Venezuela became bankrupt due to the economic crisis in 2017. Massive foreign debts and wrong economic policies crumbled Venezuela's economy. Moreover, various types of imposed economic sanctions also crippled Venezuela's economy. Venezuelan economic crisis was so severe that the Venezuelan government had to print notes of up to 10 lakh bolivars. Bolivar is the currency of Venezuela. Bolivar's value declined to such an extent that the Venezuelans had to pay up to 25 lakh bolivars for drinking a cup of coffee. Argentina was also on the verge of bankruptcy in 2020. Earlier, Argentina had become bankrupt in 2000. Inflation had increased to such an extent that Argentinians were unable to cope with it. The economic situation became so worse that the financial institutions of Argentina openly refused to repay its debt. In the end, we will know about the aid being provided by India to Sri Lanka amid the ongoing crises. India has been providing all possible aid to Sri Lankans amid the ongoing economic crises. India has provided aid of $3.5 billion to Sri Lanka in 2022 to deal with the current economic crisis by following its policy of neighbor first. India has provided essential items like food items, grains, and medicines to Sri Lanka after inflation reached its peak in the country. Ministry of External Affairs has reiterated that India will continue to work for the betterment of Sri Lanka in the future as well. Also, one of the reasons for providing immediate aid is India's neighbor China. If India fails to provide timely aid to Sri Lanka, then China will take advantage of such a scenario and will gain an edge over India and Sri Lanka. In this case, the government of India's decision of providing aid to Sri Lanka is being considered quite crucial diplomacy. However, it remains to be seen that when the situation in Sri Lanka will normalize and when other countries of the world will learn from the Sri Lankan economic crisis. Let's now move on to the story 2. In the previous episode of our program, we had discussed that Russian President Vladimir Putin dramatically escalated tensions in Europe for establishing Russia's dominance. As Russia's invasion of Ukraine did not yield desired results, Putin is now forced to recalculate and find a new justification for the invasion. In fact, post-Ukraine, Russia is now planning to invade its neighboring country, as Russian troops have already carried out several bomb attacks in Moldova's Transnistria region. After these bomb attacks, Ukraine has also claimed that Transnistria could be drawn into the war. Transnistria is the region of Moldova that lies to its east. Transnistria has declared itself as an independent country and it has its own government, currency, and several other autonomous establishments. Now, some questions might arise in your mind that how can it be inferred that Russia is planning to invade Moldova? Why Russia wants to invade Moldova, or how will Russia benefit from invading Moldova? We will try to find answers to these questions in today's story. But first of all, let us discuss about Moldova. Moldova is an Eastern European country. Earlier, Moldova was a part of the Soviet Union, but it declared its independence in 1991. Moldova shares borders with Romania to the west. It is bordered by Ukraine on the other three sides. It is a small country with a population of about 35 lakhs. Moldova has only 6,000 active soldiers. Now, one cardinal question is that how can it be speculated that Russia is planning to invade Moldova? We all know that Ukraine's insistence on joining NATO provoked Russia to invade Ukraine. However, can you recollect that when and why Russia attacked Ukraine? Russia was earlier assuring the global community that it would not invade Ukraine. However, just before invading Ukraine, Russia had officially recognized Luhansk and Donetsk as two independent countries, and it announced to send its forces for maintaining peace in these two separatist regions located in the Donbas region of eastern Ukraine. Russian troops officially entered Ukraine after the announcement. In Luhansk and Donetsk, rebel forces attacked their own people, and they falsely accused the Ukrainian army of attacking the citizens residing in these regions. Hence, Russian troops got an opportunity to invade Ukraine under the garb of peace and civilian aid. Consequently, war followed between Russia and Ukraine. The above information is quite relevant because, like Luhansk and Donetsk, Moldova is also a stronghold of Transnistria rebels. Transnistria is a wedged region between Ukraine and Moldova. It is a narrow piece of land spread over only 4,000 square kilometers. Transnistria has been ruled by separatists since its separation from Moldova in 1992. Transnistria has a population of 4.70 lakh. Majority of Transnistria's population is Russian and Ukrainian. Transnistria always had very close relations with Russia. Transnistria is a predominantly Russian-speaking region. Russia provides free gas as well as elderly pensions to the residents of Transnistria. At present, Transnistria is controlled by pro-Russian separatists. However, the global community considers Transnistria as a part of Moldova. But in reality, it functions as an independent country. Transnistria has a separate government as well as parliament. Moreover, Transnistria has its own separate army. Transnistria is also a stronghold of Russian-backed forces. However, so far Russia is not recognizing Transnistria as an independent country like it did in the case of Luhansk and Donetsk. Russia has now expressed similar concerns for Transnistria as it did for Luhansk and Donetsk. It implies that Russia has started voicing concerns about the safety and rights of the residents of Transnistria. Therefore, speculations are arising that Moldova can be the next target of Russia. However, the question remains that how will Russia be benefited from invading Moldova? President Putin has dreamt of a united Soviet Union for decades. He wants to re-merge all the erstwhile Soviet Union countries into Russia. Actually, Putin's annexation of the Crimean Peninsula and the invasion of Ukraine are consequences of his expansionist policies. As we have already mentioned that Moldova was a part of the Soviet Union, hence Putin wants to annex Moldova into Russia. Moreover, under the present circumstances, annexing Moldova may provide Russia an opportunity to open a new front against Ukraine. Basically, Moldova is located in the west of Ukraine. Once Russia succeeds in annexing Moldova, Russian forces could easily march towards the Black Sea port city of the Odessa in Ukraine from the west side. Odessa is located only 40 kilometers away from Transnistria. In addition, Russia will be able to prevent Moldova from moving closer to the European Union and NATO. On one hand, Moldova has applied to join the European Union, while on the other hand, Russia is accusing Moldova of making efforts to join NATO. Romania is already a member of NATO. In such a scenario, Russia will also succeed in eliminating the buffer zone between Russia and NATO. Another notable point is that Moldova has directly shown sympathy towards Ukraine in the Russia-Ukraine war. The leaders of Moldova have always made efforts to build better relations with the European leaders. Against such a backdrop, Russia intends to send a clear signal to the Western countries that aiding Ukraine means challenging Russia. When Finland and Sweden expressed their desires to join NATO, Russia had openly threatened both these countries. Another pertinent question is that if Russia invades Moldova, then for how long Moldova will be able to counter Russia? There is no comparison between the forces of Moldova and Russia. Moldova is such a poor country and its army is smaller than Transnistria's army. Moldova has only 6,000 active soldiers, hence it cannot counter the Russian army at all. Moreover, Moldova is totally dependent upon Russia for meeting its energy needs. It implies that if Russia invades Moldova, it will be a cause of worry for Europe, contributing to instability in the region. After the major news, let us also take a look at some other important international news. At a time when Russia and Ukraine are at war, the US intends to strengthen ties with Southeast Asian countries. Biden inaugurated a two-day summit with 10 ASEAN countries in Washington on 12 May 2022. President Joe Biden has pledged to spend $150 million on infrastructure, security, and pandemic control. It is believed that Washington intends to strengthen ties with ASEAN countries to counter China's growing dominance in this region. However, China has already pledged $1.5 billion in aid to these ASEAN countries. In such a scenario, tensions between China and the US are likely to escalate in the region. According to UN Refugee Agency data, more than 6 million people have left Ukraine since Russian invasion on Ukraine on 24 February 2022. UN reported that as of 11th May 2022, more than 6 million people had fled Ukraine. Most Ukrainians have taken refuge in Poland and Romania. Women and children comprise of up to 90% of the total refugees. Ukrainian men aged 18 to 60 are not allowed to leave Ukraine because they are eligible for military service. According to a study by the International Organization for Migration, 8 million Ukrainians have also been displaced within the country. United Nations has estimated that more than 8 million people could leave Ukraine in 2022. European Union is trying to impose sanctions on Russian oil due to the Russian-Ukrainian war. However, Hungary is opposing the EU's move. EU has proposed to phase out Russian crude oil imports within 6 months to eliminate Europe's dependence on Russian fossil fuels. Hungary's nationalist government has emphasized that it would not support any sanctions targeting Russian energy exports. Hungary is heavily dependent on Russian oil and gas. Hungary is of the view that EU's boycott of Russian oil and gas would destroy its stable energy supply, and consequently, its economy will also get destroyed. Hungary imports 85% of its natural gas and more than 60% of its oil from Russia. Now let's move on to our questions. What are the political reasons for the Sri Lankan economic crisis? What is the diplomatic significance of aid being provided to Sri Lanka by India amid the ongoing economic crisis? Evaluate. Why is it easier for Russia to invade Moldova like Ukraine? Analyze.